It's the end of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. Well, folks, today we're going to jump in that gigantic, sharp, interactive board. I want to share my thoughts on Ares Capital's latest 10Q for the first quarter of FY 2025. We all know that Ares Capital is a BDC lender to Visual Edge IT. So without any further ado, let's jump on the board. I'll share my thoughts with you. As I looked at the 10Q for the first quarter of FY 2025, I want to see what's changed from the 10K, which ended 2024. Here are some of the changes. Amortized cost increased by $1.5 million. Fair value decreases by $2.7 million. There's a swing in there of $4.2 million in these numbers. If you look at the senior preferred stock, the senior preferred stock decreases by $2.7 million in fair value. Folks, that seemed like a pretty big number to me. If you look on the 10K, which ended FY 2024, you could clearly see where the fair value on the stock position was $45.1 million, and now you can see first quarter it's at $42.4 million. $2.7 million in less value in that preferred position. If you look at the total fair value, we're at $76 million. We were at $78.7 million at the end of FY 2024. What I wanted to do is I wanted to look at the whole year for 2024. Starting in the first quarter, going all the way through the fourth quarter of the 10K. Let me just read these off to you. The fair value at the end of the first quarter for FY 2024 was $76.7 million. At the end of June, 6 months in, the fair value was $72.8. Took a pretty big decrease in fair value between the first quarter and the second quarter end in 2024. And then 9 months in, as they finished up the third quarter of FY 2024, the fair value jumped up to 78.7. We went from 72.8 6 months into FY 2025. We finish up the third quarter, we're at 78.7 fair value. Something happened over the summer, right? But here we are. They end the year at that 78.7 fair value. Moving in to the first quarter, we saw the decrease. They're right back pretty much where they were at the end or the beginning of FY 2024. They're actually a little bit less. They're at 76 million for the first quarter this year. But I wanted to go back in time. I wanted to look at the fair value in the year 2021. In the year 2021, Visual Edge IT and Ares Capital had been together for a few years. But let's look at the end of 2021. On the 10K, they were showing a fair value of $110.6 million. There it is right there. At the end of FY 2022, the fair value had dropped to 78.1. And since the end of 2022, we haven't seen it get up over that number, right? And now we're at 76 million for the first quarter of FY 2025. But it was in 2022 that Visual Edge IT had a loan that was in non-accrual. It was that senior subordinate loan. And we all know what happened in 2023. 2023, that loan, well, let's just say got taken off the books. And Ares Capital took a $48 million loss, and they took a preferred position on the balance of that senior subordinate loan. And we all remember that. Visual Edge IT, $48 million loss, and I still ask, I got to ask this question every time I do an episode regarding Visual Edge and Ares Capital. Has the leadership at Visual Edge discussed this loss? Have they owned up to any of their financial situation and how that relates with Ares Capital, their lender, to the stakeholders? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not the only one that brought up that senior subordinate loan being taken off the books and Ares Capital recognizing that loss of $48 million and taking the preferred position. It was also written in the BDC Credit Report, and I've showed you these articles before, but I do want to read this again. This isn't from me. This is from the BDC Credit Reporter. And the BDC Credit Reporter looks at all BDC lenders. And they go in there and they analyze the investments. This is what they said. Ares Capital restructures its substantial exposure to a leading IT firm and books its largest realized loss for the third quarter of FY 2023. In the third quarter, 2023, ARCC booked a $47 million realized loss, its biggest loss of the quarter. Gone is a subordinate loan. Some of the amount due was written off, hence the realized loss, and the remainder converted to preferred. A $33 million first lien loan has been extended until 2025. That was previously due in 2022. A small $3.9 million equity stake remains still valued at zero. And by the way, that 3.9 equity is still valued at zero today. The amount of income lost is substantial by our estimation, as ARCC, before the subordinate loan was placed on non-accrual, was earning annualized interest income in payment in kind form of $16 million. However, that hasn't occurred since the first quarter of 2022, when the sub-debt was last performing. So it was in that year 2022 that things started, I believe, kind of going haywire in the investment. Of course, the third quarter of 2023, some of that came to roost, right? Ladies and gentlemen, if you type in bdccreditreporter.com, there's 4 articles that the BDC Credit Reporter published regarding Visual Edge IT. I strongly suggest you go read those. The BDC Credit Reporter is a paid subscription. It's like $50 a month, but I think you should pay the $50 and go in there and read these. Get educated about BDC lenders in general. Look at some of the assets that these BDC, firms have that are in trouble. Everybody thinks that everything just goes great all the time. But folks, I tell you what, Aries Capital, for one thing, isn't the only BDC lender in the world. And all these BDC lenders have investments that I think they wake up sometimes and wish they probably hadn't started. But you can see that the times that we're in right now are extremely, they're tough. And they're challenging. And if the organizations themselves are challenged financially, the times we're in can prove to be really, really tough. I want to share this. There's an executive that used to work at Visual Edge IT. His name is David Ramos. We've all seen his content over the last month and a half. David no longer is with Visual Edge IT, and he's having a pretty... he's not real happy about him being not at the company anymore. Let's just put it that way. You've probably seen some of his content. I'm not saying I agree with everything David Ramos is throwing out there on the internet, but I will say this. David Ramos was the Chief Strategy Officer for Visual Edge IT for 6 years and 8 months. He worked for the company for 7 years, 11 months. And the content that he's putting out there, some of this content, it's really validating my thinking and the thoughts that I've been sharing for the last few years regarding this company called Visual Edge IT. I want to wrap it up with 2 questions. And I think these questions should be discussed, okay? They should be discussed openly. Are vet leaders explaining honestly the situation with BDC Lender to all stakeholders? Do all the stakeholders, the employees, the folks that are sitting on some stock or shares, has Visual Edge been honest and open about the financial situation between them and their BDC lender, Ares Capital? The other thing I'm going to ask is, why are leaders leaving the company? And here's the question, are they being replaced? Because I'm not seeing, there's been quite a few leaders that have left the company, and I haven't seen any announcements for their replacements. And, when I see that, I kind of start using my imagination, as most of you probably do too. But ladies and gentlemen, obviously we are in tough times as an industry. We're going through a massive disruption, consolidation. We've got, OEMs out there putting together contracts with 90-day cancellation clauses without cause. Holy smokes. I mean, there's a lot of things that are uncomfortable in our industry. And we need to talk about these uncomfortable things just as much as the comfortable things. Because everybody watching me knows this. Status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. Don't get stuck there, and I'll see you all tomorrow.